Everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Joshua Graham. I'm the fashion features editor at Nick Knight Show Studio, where I cover the latest intersections in the digital world, technology, and fashion. I'm very excited for today's talk because I'm joined by some incredible pioneers in the digital fashion space. And I've been thinking a lot lately about what today's fashion revolution is. In the 1960s, we had the youthquake, hemlines got shorter, ideas of self-expression and sexuality really came to the forefront. In the 90s, we had anti-fashion pioneers like Maison Margiela, who challenged traditional production models, upcycling, and really made us rethink how we not only present ourselves, but also how we produce fashion. And I mean, that was 3 decades ago. What is it now? Where are we going? And for me, I think digital fashion, still in its infancy, has presented a lot of questions and possible solutions for where we go in the future. Before we dive into it, I would love my panelists to introduce themselves, maybe starting with Claudia at the end.
Hello, thanks for the invitation. My name is Claudia. I'm a co-founder of New Format. New Format is a digital, like a creative studio, and we're working mostly digital. We are based in Berlin. We have clients like Nike, Loewe, MCM, Louis Vuitton, Ottolinger. And yeah, we're mostly doing visuals for them, and that includes like working with digital fashion. And yeah, for example, yeah, we work between the intersection between the physical and the digital. For example, in 2020, during Corona, we created a fashion show for Ottolinger with like physical models, physical garments, but we placed them in a digital environment. And you wouldn't notice that it was digital. And this is what interests us also a lot, that you don't know, is it real or not? And yeah, we work a lot for sportswear like Nike with digital assets, and yeah, also jewelry, which makes total sense to work digitally with, because you render the jewelry instead of shooting it physically, and you don't have reflections inside, and you can go very close and so on. So yeah, that's from my side.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Asaf Rib. I'm a founder of a creative studio called XXII, and we work in the realm of innovation, primarily with design-driven companies, both on content creation, so working a lot with technologies like 3D, generative AI, and also on innovation consulting and trying to help brands that are sort of like more traditional come up with new ways to design, new ways to market their products, etc. Specifically in digital fashion, it's a space that I've been involved with, I think, since quite the early days, and so it's different forms and different manifestations. I think the previous talk gave a really good sort of like landscape overview of the different definitions of what digital fashion could be. One of the projects that we did as a studio is called the Digital Fashion Archive, which is very high fidelity representations of iconic garments that are meant to sort of like augment archives and fashion museums and support designers and brands in the way that they let's say, make the image of their brand or the ideas that they have in garments last for longer than what a typical archive would be able to keep it for, but also make it more accessible, so you can basically see iconic garments from everywhere in the world rather than having access to an archive just because you live nearby, or maybe you are a fashion student or something like that. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Cool. My name is Tashkin Götz. I'm a mixed reality fashion designer. I come from traditional fashion, so my whole life I've kind of learned what goes into making and constructing clothes. I did the typical route of going to fashion school in London, doing textile development in Paris. So all of this very traditional knowledge, and I combined that constantly with with latest technology. So I looked at new tools, I looked at new kinds of cloth simulations. Today it's more generative AI. I'm always thinking, how can I implement this into making and presenting clothes? So usually when I say I'm a fashion designer, I don't just mean that I make collections, but I also design workflows, so the way clothes are made. And so therefore I'm kind of a bridge between those two worlds. And today I have a studio in Berlin, and this is where I do most of my R&D, where I develop those new workflows, and then I also do custom workflows for brands, consulting. I do visuals for brands like Boss, Premiere Vision, but then also other lifestyle-based companies like Samsung. Yeah, and I think more and more it's also education. So that meaning workshops, and it's in a way it's helping other designers to implement those new tools, because I find from my experience that it's a full-time job in itself to be up to date with the latest developments in that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Klaas. You know me as your host and was also the content director, so creating this whole program. And as you could see, there's few touches of technology and digital fashion also in this program, because with my agency, Machine, where we focus on fashion sustainability and technology, we see that it's becoming more and more important to be up to date. I do a lot of project management, but also consultancy, speaker engagements, etc., because I really feel, being a veteran in this industry, being active more than 25 years, I see there are a lot of opportunities today, and that's where I would like to build bridges, create opportunities, support the creatives, and of course create this movement in both Belgium but also abroad.
Amazing. Thank you for joining me. Odeta's presentation was a real good overview of everything that digital fashion is right now in this moment. I do think within the digital fashion space, there is so much possibility and optimism around it. But for those outside of that space, I think there are a lot of raised eyebrows and maybe big misconceptions about what digital fashion means for our future with sustainability, tangibility, etc. So I wanted to start with Anne about those misconceptions, and maybe if we can clear up some of that.
Yeah, I think the term digital fashion, indeed, as you could see also in the presentation, and there are even many more aspects, such as in the design phase, the prototyping phase, production phase, was not even touched upon, so you can use it in a lot of different ways. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that every garment we do not produce in reality and we can replace by a digital version is a big win. In previous presentations we also saw one t-shirt, for example, is 2,700 liters of water to produce it. And to make it digitally, I mean, it can be just a glass of water that some of them is drinking while making it. So it has a completely different impact. Of course, we also see in the news, like, for example, when we were all selling digital fashion as NFTs, the impact of blockchain. Yes, it had a huge impact, but it has shifted. It has also now 95% less electric use than before. So these kind of messages sometimes do not get a lot of air space. So that's also important to see. The same with artificial intelligence. Yes, if you compare it, 1,000 ChatGPT prompting is like 10% of your iPhone battery. Generating one image is a full iPhone battery. So yes, it has a very big usage of electricity today. But as announced with DeepSeek also this week, it's also shifting, and technology is going quite fast. So yes, you must be very aware of it and the impact. But at the same time, I'm a techno-optimist, so that's true. But I do think that technology and the use of digital fashion can replace certain aspects or even bring an alternative to how we perceive and enjoy fashion without having this bad ecological footprints.
Taskin and Claudia, you work with that digital space. Could you maybe talk about where you've seen your practice change, and maybe corners being cut when it comes to physical processes?
So I'm kind of torn about this idea of a digital wardrobe because today most of us don't have one, and I usually say that it's a very dynamic landscape, and so what I do today is maybe different from what I'll do in 6 months or 12 months, depending on the technology that we all use, whether we have the AR glasses or not, whether we store digital clothes or not. And so today, I think for me, it's this constant switching between physical and digital in the studio, and to make the prototyping and the development process of clothes more efficient, and to save resources in that part of the process, for with the intention of making physical clothes, because this is still what we're wearing mostly. But along the way, we can save a lot of resources and time. And then when you're saying also this idea of like misconceptions about digital, I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is that it all has this kind of gamified or super smooth aesthetic. Sometimes we tend to choose those visuals as representatives of digital fashion, but this is also something that I invest a lot of time and energy in, is to create new aesthetics that are kind of more analog, more tangible, where we kind of put a lot of time and effort into simulating like the fraying of a raw edged silk, for example.
I think that really opens up to what you do, Asaf, with the Digital Fashion Archive.
I would
Yes,
like to
yes.
would like to add from our side as creative studio. For example, digital fashion makes our workflow easier. We work for big sport brands, and for example, we created a visual campaign, and in this visual campaign there is an athlete, but the athlete has time only 15 minutes. Like, you can't do 2 shooting days with the athlete. So in this 15 minutes, the athlete gets scanned, 3D scanned. We creating an avatar, and the avatar needs clothes. And so this is how it makes our workflow easier. Or we, instead of shooting the physical shoe, we model the 3D version, which in the end looks real as outcome. And this makes it also easier, because then you have 10 colorways, and you just like change color, texture, and that's easier than shooting 10 single shoes. So, yeah.
That I find really fascinating, because there is that that ability to change things quicker, faster, easier, not to have somebody there, not to have that wide range of a team, especially for a shoot or a campaign. I think there is that criticism of removing that human element within the digital fashion space. And I think a lot of that comes down to things like aesthetics, things like conversations about machines taking human jobs. And fashion is always seen as a very emotive, creative industry. How do you as creators kind of challenge that, or want people to look at in a different way?
I'm happy to take this one. So I think it's difficult to give a good answer to an emotional maybe feeling that the public has, or that specific people have. I think to tackle problems like, to the point, is AI gonna take jobs from creatives or not? I think it's kind of like personally beyond my scope to give an answer to that. I think it's a much bigger issue. Don't know if it's a problem or not. I think it's very difficult to predict how it's going to sort of like manifest itself, and whether new roles will be created, what kind of shifts to economical models will happen as a result of this, is a question mark that's beyond digital fashion in my view. But I think this maybe ties also to your kind of like previous question about the tension between physical things and digital things, which is very interesting, and you see a lot of different manifestations of it also aesthetically. So things that are physical and look digital, and vice versa. Um, for example, in the digital fashion archive, like one of the challenges, and I can sort of like, emphasize what Tashkin was saying about the aesthetics that digital fashion automatically sort of like claimed, which is very sci-fi, very cyber, very futuristic. And I think that one of the interesting things for us was really the challenge of how to bring things that have this tactility, this beauty, this heritage, this aesthetic that fashion has developed over decades and hundreds of years, and not sort of like leaving it aside. I think one of the reasons why this aesthetic has taken over digital fashion was because it's quite easy. So without going into technicalities, it's just the most, it's the easiest thing to make something look nice when it's like chrome and shiny in 3D. It's much more difficult, as Tashkin described, to make something that looks, frayed and dirty look realistic, or make a human avatar look realistic. And I think this is actually like a missing link in a way between mass adoption of digital fashion and digital workflows for brands, to know that you're able to achieve more than the sort of like obvious cyber aesthetic, but actually use that as a tool in your arsenal as a brand or as a designer. That is not, it doesn't force you to leave everything that fashion has achieved so far behind, but it can actually augment it. And I think with generative AI, we're approaching that. So this is already a tangent, but one of the things that I think are most exciting about, where we're going with digital fashion is the new pipelines for image production that are also dependent on generative AI. And I know New Format is working with these a lot, and I'm assuming also Tashkin uses that. So how to make, renders that look extremely realistic in real time. This will give us much more options to make digital fashion that looks fantastic and looks super real, or maybe completely fantastic and not real at all.
I do think indeed it's like the new brush, a big box of brushes, but in the end it's what you as creative talents are adding to the story, the storytelling, how you enter it. So I think there's always room and importance for creativity.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to really define what or how we approach digital fashion, because I think it can be very confusing when terms are thrown out there like metaverse, generative AI. But at the end of the day, are we seeing digital fashion as a movement and as an aesthetic, as a tool for future creation?
Yeah, what I would like to add on this is that we should not, it will not replace physical fashion. It goes in parallel. When we have, for example, haute couture, it's craftsmanship, and like you can touch it and you feel different when you wear it. I mean, this is with the digital fashion as well, the point, but it is physical fashion that is very like, it's there, and then we have digital fashion, and they go in parallel. So it's not that there was physical and now the digital is coming and it's not physical anymore. And it's also not competitive tool. It's not that it's better than physical fashion or the other way around. It's more a helping tool, so we can make physical fashion maybe. We can make workflows easier. The physical fashion influences the digital, and the physical aesthetics gonna change through that. So it goes in parallel, and both is good, except fast fashion, of course. That's yeah.
And maybe it's also not that much of a clean cut, because we designers always used digital tools. We used Illustrator and Adobe products. So now with cloth simulations in 3D, it's much more accurate, and it makes production much more efficient. But I don't think that you can define digital fashion like that, because it changes as technology changes. And maybe it's also good to acknowledge that it is a landscape of a lot of different tools, and it's very muddy sometimes, and nobody's ahead of all of the developments. You can try to be up to date, but then I think navigating this landscape of tools is a very important skill that we need to acquire. And also as designers, we need to be able to identify which tools are important for me, because there's not just Clo 3D, which is like one of the main cost simulators. There's also a vast array of AI tools that will help generate tech packs or visuals for production, things that the consumer maybe doesn't even see. So I think it's important to acknowledge that there isn't one very specific image or idea of digital fashion and its in a digital fashion process.
Even the term digital fashion, because sometimes we talk about digital fashion, virtual fashion, digital twins, skins in games. You could all put it under the same umbrella, but they all have different aspects, and I think everyone you will ask will have a different definition. That's also the part of pioneering. I think it will take different
Evolve
shapes.
in different ways.
Yeah. I think virtual self-expression for me is a really good definition for that, and I also think that it is a good question, because I think for someone that comes from gaming or technology and is sort of like, has been around for a while in this space, it sounds funny that fashion people are talking about this is some kind of discovery, because we know that this is the main driver for revenue for gaming since 20 years. Buying digital assets in games are basically the business model of the most successful games in the world that are a huge economy. I mean, bigger than books and movies and music combined. So I think our take on this is really to say those same mechanics and those same technologies used in gaming and augmented reality and really, for me, it's even, posting a picture on Instagram, how can they be utilized? And it's more a question than an answer. It's how can they be utilized to benefit our industry? And how can we, do more than what we're doing currently with the old 150-year-old methods that we're using, as you said, to drive another revolution and to give more tools to brands, really, to engage with that thing that is already happening. It's not that, you can argue whether the definition of digital fashion is trendy or not trendy, and everybody's talking about metaverse, nobody's talking about metaverse. The thing itself, culturally, this shift has happened already, and it's only increasing. So I think the main question is really like, how do brands define themselves in this space? And I think this is what we're all kind of trying to answer in different ways. This is why there are so many answers. It can be AR, it can be production pipelines, can be digital assets that are creating revenue, can be partnerships with games. There are a lot of manifestations for this, but at the end, it's not something that is constrained also to fashion. People like Krista Kim, for example, who created, a beautiful house and sold it as a virtual space. This whole idea of expressing who you are through your digital persona, I think, is something that exists, regardless of whether fashion brands acknowledge that or not. And then the question is how they leverage that to, to benefit their purposes, really.
How have the brands, in your experience, been pushing the narrative of digital fashion forward? It feels like we're still in the wild, wild west of where things can go and where things should go. What in the last few years has happened that's really excited you in your practice, in your process, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In terms of digital assets like shoes, for example, I mean, sports brands are very, very on the forefront to work with 3D modeled assets, and also luxury brands in terms of bags, for example. You can create beautiful visuals that look physical or real with a 3D model. I think what's still a bit tricky is like real garments. Of course, the avatar gets garments, gets the digital fashion, but you see it always in a way. Even if you are the best of the best of the best, you see it still, that it's an avatar, and this avatar is wearing digital fashion. So I think we are already at a very, very good point. But now, at the moment, it's most about for that the client comes to us and wants to have it in a campaign, is more about shoes and bags, accessories, jewelry, like this. Yeah.
Yeah. I think marketing departments push that a lot, and it's something that we also talked about yesterday, like that they are, in a way, the evangelists of new trends because they have the ability to work in very short cycles. But I think for all of us, and I will speak only for myself, but I think this is kind of like something that you feel when you're working with larger brands. We're all agile, we're moving fast, we're working with, you know, the cutting edge of what's out there. And brands take longer to apply these changes. And I think, especially in luxury, I think maybe with a company like Nike, that's a little bit different, but there's such a tendency to de-risk. And that comes at the expense of innovation, of course. So I think the challenge is really how do you innovate without alienating existing customers, without staying too much behind, feeling like you're first, but not being the actual first that takes the risk. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, or it's more like playing around with a tool. Like for example, Gucci was available in like some games, or Balenciaga created this gamey lookbook. Yeah, but I think we are still a bit away from having an avatar that looks like a human being. And because it's really different. You directly see, even if it's made so good and with the best of the best creators, you would always see it's an avatar. And then
But it's your trained eye, because I know a lot of people that see it differently.
And I
That's
think with
also
Gen
true.
AI, that's
Yeah.
gonna disappear.
Yeah.
So I think, you know,
More and
you
more.
said, Dashkin, that you're animating your characters using AI, for example. I think, you know, these new pipelines are going to absolutely transform
that's true.
the definition
Yeah.
between what's real
AI
and what isn't.
makes it.
Yeah, and this is I think something that we haven't fully, you know, like seen yet,
Explored.
because just because not many people are, or not many big brands in the mainstream are using these tools, but it basically reality and virtual reality are going to be indistinguishable.
Maybe one last thought. I agree that it's mostly marketing today, and that in the actual design teams, you can still sense that the adoption of tools it's a bit slow, because no team will just throw all of their processes away and just like start over and swap out their designers. So this is taking a bit longer, but then yeah, we see it in pilot projects. I think right now a lot of exciting projects are happening with platforms and magazines rather than in the fashion houses themselves. And I was also very lucky, I think, to be present, to do digital fashion already like a few years ago when I was still in fashion school, and then suddenly designing a digital cover look for Vogue Singapore, or working with Nick Knight on Icon One. So it was always these pioneering institutions that curate and present fashion, I think, that push the boundaries.
Yeah, big shout out to Show Studio for promoting
Hey.
this.
You always have this the Gartner hype cycle. And
Yeah.
now we're like this through of disillusion and then going back up towards the next phase, I think.
No, Nick really finds the space and the metaverse the next kind of platform for where fashion is going. He's always really pioneered innovators within that space. With that being said, I want to close off with what we're excited to see in the next few years in regards to digital fashion, virtual fashion. What's happening now that has you really excited for where it's going?
For me, it's let's take it very close. Yesterday we had the event Motor, the Berlin edition, which was the very first edition showcasing 11 local creative talents, and it's a concept I also would like to travel also to different cities, because I truly believe there is so much talent, so much creativity out there that deserves this platform. So yeah, eager to do a little bit more of that.
I'm excited about a wider variety of digital looks and digital brand identities, and seeing many houses like define for themselves how they want to present digitally, and so this kind of slowly moving away from a uniform aesthetic towards also romantic analog aesthetics, like how would Ande Møhlemeister look in the digital space, things like that. And generally the adoption of tools. I'm excited for the time when it's a standard to prototype digitally, and when the manufacturers are also like when they're able to work with your digital files, because right now these are also very pragmatic issues in the actual like making in the industry. It's like maybe one part of the team works digitally, but the other doesn't. So how do you work together? And I think there's a slow adoption of it, but within the next few years, I think it'll be more of a standard.
And I'm also excited to see him win the Festival d'Hier, because I think it's quite important that he is nominated in a traditional fashion environment.
Thank you. Yeah, means a lot.
Yeah, I think the acceptance of, I think the fact that we're here at, at the invitation of Fashion Council Germany, talking about digital fashion, that we had the event yesterday celebrating the work of German artists that are creating digital fashion. And I think everyone that is sitting on stage, like both Claudia, myself, and Tashkin and Anne, also sort of like strive to make content and work that is, really at the level that it's not a compromise, it's an upgrade for what brands are currently doing. So I think, the transition of this from niche into mainstream, I think, is something that I'm excited about. I expect it. I think it's something that is absolutely natural. And and of course, Gen AI is, I don't know how many people here are kind of like, working with the nerdy things that we are, but it's a complete revolution. And this is going to manifest itself in new ways to make content, new ways to create influencers, new ways to sell product. So that's, a whole topic that is just absolutely exciting.
Yeah, but as we already said, these are tools and they get better and better. And of course, I'm super excited to get like at a certain point where you can't tell anymore, is this real or not?
Incredible. Thank you for
Thank
joining me,
you.
and thank you
Thanks.
all.
Thank
Then
you.
I will
Thank you.